Languages. Everyone speaks one. Some more poetic, some more serious, and some Hungarian. Speaking a language is the basis of the human experience, and with our world being as vast and diverse as it is, it's no surprise that there are over 7,000 languages spoken on our planet. However, few are as controversial as the one spoken in Europe's Bermuda Triangle, Serbo-Croatian. If you've ever made the fatal mistake of visiting the Balkans, more specifically the countries of ex-Yugoslavia, you've probably noticed that all the people there, except for the special snowflakes from these countries, speak the same language and can communicate with each other fluently with no issues at all. But if you'd ever dare to point this out, you'd immediately have millions rushing towards you and correcting you that, actually, there is no such thing as Serbo-Croatian. Serbian, Bosnian, and Croatian are completely different languages, and don't you dare say otherwise! But why is that? Well, to find out, we first have to travel back into the past. The phenomenon of today's Serbian, Croatian, and Bosnian languages is extremely new and only came about politically in the 90s with the breakup of Yugoslavia and the subsequent wars that followed it. For the vast majority of their existence, they were never even defined as distinct languages. Rather, they were just grouped together as the same language, which was referred to by a variety of different names throughout history, such as Slavic, Slavonian, and even Illyrian. Because the Balkans were most of the time under the control of some foreign empire, the languages spoken by the locals was a lot of the time only used colloquially and existed in a sort of a shadow of the language of the empire they were under, such as German, Turkish, Hungarian, and even Latin. So, for literal centuries, no one batted an eye about what language was spoken here up until the late 18th century, when an itty-bitty ideology was born that completely transformed the Balkans to its core. Nationalism, baby!
I am more white than you. You look gypsy. I am blonde hair.
Your mother is gold.
Why you keep talking?
As the Slavs living in the Balkans were oppressed by a foreign ruler for centuries, nationalism suddenly became a driving force for unification and independence from foreign influence. The effects of this new ideology were so great that the 19th century overall in practically every single Balkan country is known as the national and cultural revival period. As such, the similarities between the language spoken between the Slavs and the Balkans became very well known and documented. In fact, they became so well documented that most intellectuals and linguists came to the revolutionary conclusion that it was the same language. This discovery spawned the Illyrian movement, which was led by the highest of Serbian and Croatian intellectuals and writers, who with it aimed to define the shared South Slavic Balkan language and codify it into an official literary form. This momentum for the formalization of their shared language into one culminated into the Vienna Literary Agreement, where the Serbs and Croats, represented by esteemed writers and language reformers Vuk Karadžić and Ivan Mažuranić, adopted an official literary form of the South Slavic language, which throughout the years would become known as Serbo-Croatian. Prior to the Vienna Agreement, Serbo-Croatian existed and, well, still exists in 4 different major dialects: Čakavian, Kajkavian, Štokavian, and Torlakian, all of which can be put into 2 additional dialect groups of Ekavski and I-Ekavski, depending on whether or not they include the sound I when saying a word with the letter E in it or not. The difference between the two being that Ekavski drops the sound and I-Ekavski pronounces it. Anyway, instead of creating a new Frankenstein of a language by pulling elements from all the different dialects, Štokavian was chosen to be the official literary language for the southern Slavs of the Western Balkans. The name Serbo-Croatian didn't get picked up by everyone until the early 20th century. Soon after the Kingdom of Yugoslavia was formed in 1918, it became the kingdom's official language. The official form of the language continued to evolve and be reformed throughout the 20th century. The most notable of these reforms was the Novi Sad Agreement, which again brought the creme de la creme of Serbian and Croatian literary intellectuals together to level and standardize the language. With the agreement, it was decided that the language developed in two literary hotspots, Belgrade and Zagreb, that both of its writing systems, Latin and Cyrillic, and pronunciations, Ekavski and Ijekavski, were equal. And most importantly of all, that the management and standardization of the language's grammar and terminology will be handled by the universities of Belgrade, Zagreb, and Sarajevo, as well as Matica Srpska and Matica Hrvatska, the two literary and cultural associations of their respective republics. As such, throughout the 19th and vast majority of the 20th century, Serbo-Croatian was accepted by academia and intellectuals as one single language with a variety of not so dissimilar dialects, which, speaking from a linguistics point of view, is practically the same case with the majority of the world's languages. However, this view started to change in the 70s as ethnic tensions within Yugoslavia start to rise. Slowly the people start to prefer to call their language either Serbian Croatian or Bosnian instead of Serbo-Croatian. And as the civil war overwhelmed Yugoslavia, Serbo-Croatian officially went out of use by all parties involved. But although they stopped using a language, that doesn't mean you have to as well. Especially not when there's LingoPie, baby! LingoPie is an innovative language learning platform that allows users to learn a language by watching movies and TV shows in their desired language. How's that different from watching them on any other platform? Well, LingoPie has interactive subtitles and widgets integrated that help you integrate and learn new vocabulary into your lexicon then and there. 2 years ago, LingoPie first reached out to me to work together, and ever since I've been thinking, God damn, props to the guy who came up with the idea for that, cause it's brilliant. So with LingoPie's interactive subtitles, you can get a word translated instantly and added to your personalized vocabulary. You can also turn on double subtitles, where you get them both in your desired language and English. If you're looking to then practice the new words that you learned, you have widget games like personalized flashcards and different types of quizzes. You can practice pronunciation as you have widgets that give you instant feedback on your pronunciation and will guide you to get better with repetition mode. Currently, LingoPie is available in the 9 languages shown on screen and has over 3,000 available shows and movies for you to check out. My friend who was learning Italian signed up for it and loved it. And if they had either Romanian or Hungarian, you can bet your ass I'd be using them instead of hoping that my desired show has the subtitles synced to the dub on Netflix. I don't get it. Why do they always have to be out of sync? God damn Netflix. So, don't waste any more time. Go and click the link in the description and get LingoPie today while my exclusive discount code still lasts. I genuinely can't recommend it enough. As the war intensified, the treatment of Serbo-Croatian by the parties involved started to delve into revisionist politics. Both the Serb and Croat governments started to insist that their dialect, or as it was now seen, a language, was distinctly different from the opposite and started to impose language purism. In the newly established Republika Srpska in Bosnia, Ekavski was pronounced as the official dialect of the government, even though the majority of its population spoke in the Ijekavski dialect. This embracement of Ekavski was taken to high levels of ridiculousness at times that the name of Croatian cities such as Osijek, Bjelovar, and Bosnian Bijeljina were translated to Osijek, Belovar, and Beljina. However, other nationalists went in the other direction and stated that all dialects of now ex-Serbo-Croatian were, depending on their nationality, either Serbian or Croatian. The Serbs in particular went hard with this motion, so hard in fact that in 1998 the official Serbian government stated in their national newspapers, Politika, that not only does Serbo-Croatian not exist, but it never even existed, and that Croatian doesn't exist either. Croatian speaks Serbian without even knowing it, and with that, Croats don't exist either, but are just simply Serbs. In Croatia, similar language revisionism was adopted. As the country and people were trying to distance themselves from Serbia and Serbs, they decided to reform the language as a way to distinguish it from Serbian. As such, if Serbo-Croatian had 2 words for a term, one was adopted as officially Croatian and the other was assigned as Serbian. Although sounding initially rational, essentially this was a policy of saying synonyms from the same language were words of completely different languages. The best example of this could be seen with the word for iron. In Serbo-Croatian, iron could be said in two ways. In Serbian as gvožđe and in Croatian as željezo. The Croatian government claimed that gvožđe was incorrect and Serbian, and the latter should be exclusively used. However, gvožđe, referring to iron, has been used for centuries in Croatian literature, such as in Šarić's Croatian translation of the Bible, Mežuranić's The Death of Smile Aga Čengić, in the works of August Šenoa, works of Gundulić, works of Kamov, and many others. This policy in Croatia only intensified as the years went by, so much so that it reached high levels of absurdity. The government lobbied its linguistics organizations to purify the language. As such, even after the war between Croatia and Serbia was concluded, the Croatian government was implementing new official Croatian words in the language's lexicon. Serbo-Croatian words for helicopter was changed to zrakomlat, meaning air flare. Telephone, telefon, was changed to brzoglas, meaning fast voice, and even ćevapi were renamed to mljevnici, meaning grounded up ones. This policy became so absurd that in 1999, when a Serbian film by the name of Rane, meaning scars, was showcased in Croatian theaters, its title was translated and renamed to Ozljede. For those of you that don't speak Serbo-Croatian, it was essentially as if an American movie titled Cookies was played in the UK and then renamed to Biscuits. As a result, Croatia's language purism became a subject of ridicule in other ex-Yugoslav republics, but in Croatia as well, as essentially the government and linguistics associations were creating new Croatian-sounding words by merging and modifying existing ones to replace any and all loanwords in the language. In recent times, the Serbo-Croatian language revisionism has mellowed out and is no longer the insanity it was in the 90s. However, its traces can still be seen from time to time. In Bosnia, these ghosts can be best observed in everyday life. If you use an ATM in Sarajevo, you'll be greeted with the option to withdraw your money in 3 separate languages: Bosnian, Croatian, and Serbian. If you purchase a product and check its ingredients or use instructions, again, you might find 3 translations for these completely unintelligible languages. In Croatia, annual competitions are held in which contestants are tasked to come up with new Croatian words which would replace foreign loanwords in the language. While in Serbia, where both the Latin and Cyrillic script are seen as co-official for the language, demonstrations and movements to ditch Latin appear from time to time. While both countries utilize Serbo-Croatian translators when it comes to judiciary proceedings and sometimes in politics as well. And by Serbo-Croatian translators, I literally mean in Serbia they have Croatian translators and in Croatia they have Serbian translators. Here and there you'll also see reactionary news headlines when the Serbian minority in Croatia is not allowed to put signs on monuments in Cyrillic, which would say the same thing if it were written in Latin as well, which will then subsequently cause a diplomatic incident between the two. Although this revisionism and language purism never went away from the territories of ex-Yugoslavia, hell, if anything, it even spread to Montenegro, who is now claiming to speak its own Montenegrin language. Most foreign linguists and intellectuals still consider all these new languages as the same one, Serbo-Croatian. Which is quite hilarious, as despite all the mental gymnastics the leaderships from these countries went through to distinguish themselves from the other, the reality is, facts don't care about your feelings. So yeah, that would be sort of the explanation on why these 4 languages consider themselves separate and the dumb politics the leaders from these countries took to legitimize their plight. Let me know what you think and what I missed. Were you surprised by any of this? Tell me in the comment section down below. As always, if you like this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and if you really like it, become a member like these wonderful people, or get yourself some merch from theironicsshop.com. My name is Janos, and you've watched Living Ironically in Europe.
Hey, why are you leaving?